Royal Jordanian is undergoing a major fleet overhaul. As the airline takes delivery of brand new Airbus narrow-body aircraft and Boeing 787-9s, it's also revamping its existing fleet of 787-8s. Unfortunately, the new cabin won't be featured in today's video as we're flying the airline's original long-haul product from Amman back to Chicago. In this video, we're not only going to cover the flight as usual, but also discuss Royal Jordanian's long-standing history in Chicago and the importance that the Windy City holds for the airline. Good morning from the Amman Airport Hotel, where after arriving from Medina the night before, I was able to rest a little before continuing the long journey home. The hotel itself isn't anything extraordinary, but the room was comfortable and a pleasant way to spend my overnight layover. Royal Jordanian provides this hotel complimentary for economy class passengers with layovers above 8 hours and business class passengers with layovers above 6 hours. However, specific ticket criteria have to be met, and I'll leave a link to the airline's terms and conditions in the description. I skipped out on the free breakfast this morning and got straight on the bus to the airport. I could recognize almost everyone on board from last night, as we were all on the flight from Medina and most of us were headed to either Manchester, Toronto, Montreal, or Chicago. Royal Jordanian flights headed to countries in Europe and North America primarily depart in the morning hours, with limited exceptions. Now, because all of us were connecting passengers, everyone had their boarding passes, and thus it was straight to security. There is one security checkpoint as soon as you enter the terminal, followed by passport control and then the main security check. The entire process took about 40 minutes, and once complete, I was glad to finally be airside. Amman Airport has a lot of great food and retail options, and the main terminal is divided into two wings. As usual with most international flights to North America, the gates serving those departures are cordoned off from the rest of the terminal and thus require an additional security check, which thankfully was rather quick. And as soon as I reached the gate, so too did our 787, arriving 2 hours late from Bangkok. All of Royal Jordanian's Dreamliners are named after members of the Jordanian royal family, and our aircraft today, Bravo Alpha Charlie, is named after Princess Selma bint Abdullah. And a random fun fact, this plane's delivery flight was from Boeing Payne Field to Chicago to Amman. And on that note, Chicago has always been a key destination for Royal Jordanian. Service to the Windy City began in 1984 with Lockheed L-1011s making stopovers in Vienna, Austria. By the 1990s, Airbus A310s began operating the route with a stopover in Shannon, Ireland. Eventually, Royal Jordanian received its first Airbus A340-200 in 2002 and later opened non-stop service between Amman and Chicago. The A340-200s and sometimes the A330-200s carried the long-haul routes until the 787 arrived in 2014. The photo you see here is from my grandparents in 2012 when they flew from JFK. Today, Chicago is, by far, Royal Jordanian's prime long-haul destination as the only North American city receiving daily service. Not only that, but during the peak summer and winter seasons, Royal Jordanian adds an extra flight, bringing Chicago up to 10 weekly flights. Royal Jordanian's continued success in Chicago for the last 42 years is primarily because it's home to one of America's largest Middle Eastern diasporas. It's not only a convenient option for those visiting family in Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Egypt, etc., but also for those traveling on pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia. Of course, the local Arab communities are a prime factor more than anything else behind RJ flying to the destinations they serve in North America, namely Toronto, Montreal, New York JFK, Washington Dulles, Detroit, Chicago, and as of May 2026, Dallas-Fort Worth. Royal Jordanian currently operates a fleet of 7 787-8s and 2 787-9s. Here's Bravo Alpha Golf, the 787 I flew from Chicago a few days earlier, which was the first 787 to receive the new livery. And since this flight, our aircraft today, Bravo Alpha Charlie, is currently being repainted in Haikou, China. Eventually, the plan is to retrofit all of the 788s with new business class and economy class seats like those on the new 789s. Currently, I believe only one 788 has the new cabin, Bravo Alpha Alpha, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Soon enough, it was time for boarding, and if you look closely, you'll notice the line of fellow passengers totally not moving. And sure enough, we all just kind of stood in the corridor for about 15 minutes until we finally made some progress. And as we moseyed down the jet bridge, I can't help but comment on just how classy RJ's livery is, especially on the Dreamliner. As of now, only 3 788s remain in the old scheme, and you have to give credit to RJ, they've been repainting their planes pretty quickly. In comparison, Etihad's new livery came out 12 years ago, and yet they still have 777s flying around in the old colors, which I'm in full support of because I prefer this livery a lot more. This morning I'll be seated in 7A, and the seats feature personal entertainment screens, USB-A power, universal power outlets, and the usual tray tables and seat pockets. Legroom is decent, especially if you don't have a bag in front, and all passengers receive freshly wrapped blankets and pillows. Now, while the seats aren't in the worst shape, these cabins are showing their age. Parts of the seat fabric were ripped and had holes, and you can't really tell here, but the window brightness controls were also torn and beat up. And that's not even the most bizarre thing about the windows. I'm not sure what it was on this aircraft, but for some reason I couldn't figure out how to fix this weird yellowish tint. Forget the brightness controls, I could fix that, but I couldn't get rid of this tint. So now everything just looks like that stereotypical yellow filter that all these Hollywood movies use to portray the Middle East and South Asia. If you know, you know. took this flight in March of 2026 during the height of the conflict in the Middle East. Royal Jordanian flights typically transit Israeli airspace, especially those to North America. However, during this time, the airspace was closed, meaning we had to first fly south through Jordanian airspace, then bank right to enter Egyptian airspace and proceed on course from there. Interestingly, this detour barely added any flight time for the Chicago to Amman route, but going back to Chicago, it was the complete opposite. During normal circumstances, this flight takes around or less than 12 hours and 15 minutes. With the detour, the average flight time was around or above 12 hours and 45 minutes, and today, our flight time was 13 hours and 12 minutes. Lunch service began just 30 minutes after departure with a choice of either chicken or beef. I went with the beef option that was served on a bed of rice alongside a bread roll, baklava, salad, tiramisu, a water cup, and a choice of beverage. Now, I'm personally not a salad guy in general, but like the other meals I've had on Royal Jordanian, this was delicious and filling, and overall the food offerings on RJ really exceeded my expectations. The entertainment system is good and full of content to keep you entertained, though I believe these particular systems will be replaced with newer ones as these aircraft get retrofitted. Earphones were provided just before departure, and while nothing amazing, they get the job done. About 7 hours into the flight, we received our second meal service, and I think the choices were either a chicken or seafood quesadilla. I went with the seafood option that was filled with shrimp and rice, and it was served alongside more baklava, pasta salad, and a water cup. Now, apart from the flight attendants coming around with water later on in the flight, there was no other service for the remaining 5 hours. Overall, as usual, the meal was good, and I didn't have any complaints. Now, with everything going on in the Middle East, there was a lot of uncertainty surrounding this trip, and I have to say, I am very grateful to Royal Jordanian for continuing to serve not only its passengers, but also its kingdom during this chaotic time. My travel to, within, and back from Saudi Arabia, along with the overnight visit to Jordan, was overall seamless and without any major hiccups. This trip was booked as part of an Umrah package that included flights, transportation in Saudi, and all accommodations. Overall, Royal Jordanian is a nice airline, and it will soon become much better as far as the onboard product is concerned. They're definitely not on the level of Turkish or Qatar Airways, but they are generally a cheaper option. So while they wouldn't be my first choice for travel back to Saudi or the Middle East in general, if the price is right, I will definitely fly them again, and I especially can't wait to try out the new 787-9 someday. And with that, immigration took just under 10 minutes, followed by around 45 minutes waiting for bags. Thank you all so much for tuning in today, and while this trip may be over, lots more content is coming right up. Until next time, take care everyone, and I'll see you all again very soon.